presented by Prize Picks. Get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 and use the promo code. Welcome to Light Years. Tommy, how you doing, my man?
I am doing well, man. I had a nice, relaxing weekend watching basketball. And starting a new week. So everything's going well on this end.
Nice. We're recording this Monday afternoon, just to give everyone clarity. Monday evening, in fact. Call Monday evening. The thing I like about kind of the finals is most of the transaction stuff does kind of stop. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm sure you saw the report today that the Jazz are willing to re-engage Lauri Markkanen again. And I'm just sitting there going like, no,
we're not going there.
Not again. Fool me once. No, not happening. Not happening again. But it does kind of, it is kind of like 2 weeks of just basketball before we get to the silly season. Into the silly season again.
Big time. And it feels like there's going to be a lot of moving parts pretty quickly once the season ends. That's just kind of my initial read on it. I could be wrong, but it feels like we might start getting news like a day after the season ends.
There's an old saying in Tennessee. I know it's in Texas.
This is for Lauri Markkanen right here.
Fool me once. Shame on you.
A+ delivery for W, by the way.
Fool me, we can't get fooled again.
An underrated funny guy, regardless of your views on his politics.
Character for sure. But so we're expecting a crazy offseason. But be honest with me. Would it surprise you if the Warriors did not have a crazy offseason? It was more understated.
It feels like increasingly it might not be a crazy offseason. I do think there will be some movement along maybe the margins of the roster, but kind of the big move that everybody's expecting, the Kuminga sign and trade potential thing, that feels less likely than it maybe did a month ago, when he was sitting on the bench during the playoffs. So yeah, I do think that we're going to see some movement on the roster. I don't think it'll be, the same 15 guys or whatever, but I'm feeling less and less confident they can get something done on the Kuminga front that makes sense, or that they have an appetite for.
I mean, here's the other part of it. I just don't think the Warriors have that great of assets. Mm-hmm. The main thing they have is post Steph Curry picks. And I just don't actually believe they're willing to give them up at the frequency that you see online. That's my general belief on this. I could be wrong. Maybe they have better assets than I think they do. But I'm just sitting here, I'm going, they ended the year pretty strong. And I could easily see this team rolling into it with the mindset of what we're not going to do is make a panic trade. What we're not going to do is make a panic trade. We were 23-8 with Jimmy Butler, kind of like 2021 when we found some stuff out and we just made some moves on the margins and came back and won a title the next year. I could absolutely see that being the offseason.
And they wouldn't necessarily be wrong for that approach. All that stuff's true. They were one of the best teams in the NBA after the Jimmy trade. And because of that, I think they can feel somewhat confident that there's at least a top 6 seed here, especially if you do get some just kind of regular improvement from a Podziemski or from a Moses Moody or whoever, you know what I mean? Buddy Hield, second year in the system. He understands stuff better, et cetera, et cetera. You can kind of bank on some of that. Do I think that makes they could jump to tier 1 contender status just by running it back more or less? Probably not, unless, Kuminga comes back and he takes a massive leap and really actually starts to figure it out. But outside of that, they would still be a team that has a puncher's chance to win a title, but they wouldn't be a favorite by any means.
I don't know if I agree.
Really?
So I pulled up the numbers here. So you're looking at the same numbers as me. Mm-hmm. From the point they traded for Jimmy Butler, they had the 3rd best net rating in the NBA. 23-8. They had the best defense in the NBA from that trade on. They had the 9th best offense, which kind of matches the eye test. Smart offensive team, lacking kind of the explosiveness, right? Yep. It's Steph, and then everyone else is kind of a Steph merchant offensively, for lack of a better way to put it. But defensively, I believe what they were doing was real. We'll get to Kuminga later, but why would what we saw from Podziemski in the second half of the season not continue and improve? Why would Moses Moody, who I thought was excellent up until the playoffs, not improve? I guess what I'm saying is we put so much emphasis on the way the season ended, which was super disappointing. Those playoff games sucked. But then we get reports, Pods, surgery on his finger. Moses Moody, surgery on his hand.
Yeah.
You could say, okay, maybe they didn't hit shots because first time in the big moment, or maybe they just had ligament injuries in their hands and they're not Steph Curry, who's a freak and can shoot with that, Can point out how Jimmy was disappointing versus Gobert, or maybe you could point out that who gives a fuck? Steph wasn't on the floor. Nothing they do works without Steph on the floor at that level anyway. So what I'm saying is it was a disappointing way they ended the whole thing, but I'm not going to over-index what was non-Steph Curry basketball because end of the day, they're not going to win a title with Steph off the floor anyway. You'd like to think they could have stayed alive a little better without him, but they're not going to do anything. And I'm looking at this from the standpoint of, okay, what if they do go find this offseason's Otto Porter and this offseason's Bielitsa and bank on some internal improvement from Podziemski, who I thought had a really good second half to the season, really January on, and Moses Moody, who's really good January on. And again, we're going to get to Kuminga later, but why not bank on that if the home run is not there?
I mean, that it feels pretty binary, right? Like those are really the only two options. You move Kuminga for something real, or you just kind of more or less run it back and you use your free agency tools, your vet mins, and obviously they'd have up to, depending on what the Kuminga contract would be. I think that essentially takes them out of the full mid level. Yeah. So I mean, the argument would be development isn't linear. Number one, maybe those guys stagnate a little bit, and then number two, you might see some age regression from a Steph, a Jimmy, or a Draymond. And that would be a concerning thing to me. And that's why I would want them to go reinforce the roster in a real way, at least for the regular season part of it, and the playoffs are a different animal, but these guys are all going to be a year older. And it makes me a bit uncomfortable just running it back and hoping that they don't regress and then just banking that the young guys will improve at the same time. That's asking for a lot to go right. And it feels like this is what they've done for years now is you just kind of bank on these moonshots going right. And these are less of moonshots, but it feels like kind of playing this game, but I would assume internally that's how they're thinking of it because that's the way they operate.
All right, let's assume they bring back the core. And I'm going to define the core liberally. So obviously Steph, Draymond, Jimmy, but also the younger, we'll throw Moses Moody in there. We'll throw Pods in there. We'll throw Buddy Hield in there. We'll throw Kuminga in there. We'll throw Quentin Post in there. So you're at about 8 players right now. Mm-hmm. What would be the first thing you'd want to attack to help this roster?
It's a good question. If that's the roster,
I feel like there's two. I feel like it's 2 answers, and I can go back and forth on which one I think is more valuable.
Yeah, at that point, if that's the roster, I probably wouldn't go a scoring guard type first. I'd go kind of a bigger wing who can knock down some shots and has some defensive versatility, or a big man. I think it's either one of those two things. Because if you have those guys, you don't really need another guard per se. You have enough guards on the roster. And, if you're hoping Pods improves a little bit as a scorer, Buddy is more consistent.
Kuminga.
Yeah, Kuminga obviously brings some scoring punch. You're hoping that you have enough internally, scoring-wise, and then kind of that bigger wing or the center who, might have some stretch capability. They're almost like a skeleton key for some of the younger guys in terms of providing spacing and playmaking and smarts and stuff like that helps those younger guys pop a little bit more and makes their lives easier.
Yeah, I think I'd go stretch big as my number one want with this. I pretty much agree with you on the scoring guard. It would be nice to have someone who could, had a little juice, get into their bag, whatever you want to call it, someone who could just light it up a little bit. But I think you would be betting heavily on Kuminga to be a secondary or really non-Steph lineup scorer. You're not even asking him to be Jordan Poole. You're just asking him to be a consistent source of 15 efficient points a game. You're asking Pods to be a consistent source of 15 efficient points. Really, you're asking the two of them to be 30 points out of them in an efficient fashion. And let's be real, Kuminga is going to do it getting downhill. So what do you want to do to make lineups work? You need a big who can anchor the defense just enough, but can stand on the perimeter on offense. Those guys aren't easy to find.
Yeah.
I think the only one who might be attainable for the taxpayer mid-level is Brook Lopez.
Yeah. And he's up there in age, but
that's the only one. Like, is there anyone else I'm missing? I feel like all the other ones are trade options.
No, I don't think so. There's nobody that really comes to mind. I mean, Naz Reid, but his market's going to be crazy. We've talked about him ad nauseum. So you would go more stretch big. You wouldn't want to rely on post to do that and then maybe get like more of a rim runner type. You know what I mean? Like Jimmy's shown the ability to play with guys like that. I think it would be nice to have like a vertical option as a pick and roll partner for Steph. You know, in more kind of like space.
Hey, bearded trace. I think if you want to make lineups with Jimmy and Kuminga or Jimmy and Draymond or Draymond and Kuminga work, the third front court player in all those scenarios has to be a guy that forces defenders to stick to him at the 3-point line.
Yeah.
To your point, it could be a big wing. It could be a big wing, but my biggest fear with it being a big win is it forces a ridiculous amount of Draymond at the 5 minutes, which is something I want to avoid in the regular season. So yeah, I guess the dream scenarios, you find that mythical stretch big that they never get, they can never find. But to me, that would be the first option. Someone who, to your point, skeleton key is actually a perfect way to put it. It's not even that they're a dominant player. It's that they're a very good player who makes a ton of lineups work that shouldn't work otherwise. Because we saw it. What was their issue with Jimmy and Kuminga playing together?
Lack of spacing.
That was, obviously Kuminga, he's slower mentally in terms of like processing the game, and you're throwing him in off an injury with a player who's never played with. So some of the issue was, they didn't develop chemistry. He didn't know where to go, that sort of thing. But to your point, the easiest one you can attack is, dude, they're trying to do it with like a Looney on the floor or other guys who don't have any space. So, you can make that thing work a lot easier if you get a guy who can actually space the floor.
100%. You wouldn't feel comfortable enough with post at this point as your kind of starting center is like a placeholder or just like kind of your nominal starting big in like a Zaza fashion, just to keep those Draymond at the 5 minutes down and then roll them with Trace and I guess maybe some other center they find on the market. And then I think if I'm using the taxpayer mid-level or like any type of mid-level, I just lean a wing, because like the bigs that you're going to find at that range, they're not closing games for you. Maybe the wings aren't either. I'd have to see all the options, but I think I lean the bigger wing over the stretch big man because they already have a stretch big on the roster who I feel pretty good about as a 15 to 20 minute a game guy next year.
They really need shooting. So if they can get shooting and a big man at two for one, I think it's worth it. With that said, I'm looking at the options here, and to your point, Brook Lopez potentially in the taxpayer mid-level range, although I'm not convinced someone's not going to just give him a bunch of money because it's hard to find guys with the skills. Like, how do we know Detroit's not going to do it just because they can?
1 year, 20 million or whatever,
exactly.
They just have the money.
Something that the Warriors can't do.
Right.
And then there's the obvious, like, Naz Reid, if that option came available or stuff like that, but that gets away from the idea of just running it back. That gets to facilitate a Naz Reid, you're probably moving a Kuminga, a Moody, just to make contracts work, right? So that's where I lean on it. That's kind of where I lean on it at this point. Before we move on, how do you feel about Game 3?
I think if the Pacers don't win, they're in a lot of trouble. I would assume
you really think 3 is going to be like, you don't like the odds of them losing Game 3 and coming back in Game 4?
I just think OKC's probably the better team. So going down 2-1 and then having to win essentially 3 out of 4 games to win the series puts them in a really bad spot.
Yeah. Well, I will not be quitting on our Pacers.
Oh, I'm not quitting on them. I will.
So I'm taking the more on Halliburton for Game 3. I'm seeing people starting to get a little skeptical of Hallie, and I'm here to tell you, do not question the Halliban. Bad idea. Guys, cash in on basketball playoffs with Prize Picks. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the court to your Prize Picks lineup. Whether it's points, rebounds, or assists, take your picks more or less for your shot to win up to 2,000x your cash. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this summer. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports takes into real money all season long. And enjoy the flex play, which means you can still cash out when your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Guys, download the app today. Use code LIGHTYEARS. Get $50 instantly when you play your first $5. That's code LIGHTYEARS. Get $50 instantly when you play your first $5. Prize Picks, run your game.
Light Years Podcast, we are brought to you by Via. If you haven't tried Via yet, you're seriously missing out. Whether you need to unwind, refocus, or just pretend you have your life together, Via is here to enhance your everyday, and let's be honest, probably your night too. With products ranging from 0 to high cannabinoid levels, Via lets you fully customize your experience to fit your needs. And the best part, Via legally ships across the USA. Discreet, direct to your door, no medical card required, and backed by our worry-free guarantee. So if you're 21 plus, check out the link to Via in our description and use the code LIGHTYEARS to receive 15% off, free shipping on orders over $100. And if you're new to Via, you get a gift free of choice. After you purchase, they ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show. Tell them Light Years sent you. Enhance your everyday with Via.
So, I mean, the more I'm thinking about this, the more I'm realizing there's not really a lot of avenues to improve this roster if they don't make a move. But I'm really like the point I'm probably trying to get to that we're not talking about as earnestly up front is what if they bring Kuminga back? Because there's a world in which they trade one of Buddy or Moody. They use a taxpayer mid-level. So that's two players who are going to make between 7 and 15 mil that you've added. 2 guys you're hoping can really help your rotation. But they keep Kuminga because the sign and trade is not there. What would you think? Is there a way to make Kuminga work with this group? Because let's be honest, that from the Jimmy trade on, he was kind of persona non grata. He comes back, does not play well. He does show in the non-Steph games against Minnesota. Not bum. Not worthless. But it always feels like it's the Warriors and Kuminga, and they're 2 separate entities when we discuss them.
Totally. And people have made the Wiseman comparisons, and there is some merit to those just under the terms of the way that the organization has handled it and how attached the front office has been to him and how it's hampered roster building in some aspects. But just in terms of the player on the court, they're night and day. Like there is genuine basketball talent there with Kuminga. Like, and that shouldn't go unsaid. Like, he might not be people's favorite player depending on like your basketball preferences, but there's genuine talent there. It's about how he applies it and how he approaches the game. And it doesn't perfectly mesh with what the Warriors want to do and how Steve wants to play, how Steph wants to play, how Dre wants to play, Jimmy, etc.
Why is that?
Because he wants to be Kobe. And they don't need him to be Kobe. They need him to be Sean Marion, as Steve has said 100 times at this point. But
there's an irony because the system that they play is literally like the evolution of the triangle.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if the thing is, if he was Kobe, he would shine so brightly in this system because like it's perfectly tailored for like a guy who can score in the mid post. Like, even though like people give a lot of credit to the shooting, but there are just like a lot of natural post up opportunities that most offenses don't have. Like they could just throw the ball to him and do split cuts 15 times a game if he was like an excellent post player.
I mean, Sean Livingston comes to mind.
Right.
As someone who just like, it was there for him whenever they wanted to use it.
Right. Exactly.
David West.
Yeah, David. I mean, there's guys throughout kind of this past 10 years or so that like, yeah, they pop into mind and they've kind of dominated from those spots, the elbows, the low block, the mid block, whatever you want to say. But I do think it's workable, and Steve said it, he would give it a longer leash if Kuminga comes back. It would give them a full training camp to figure stuff out. There is a lot of smart people within this organization and on this roster to where I think they would make it at least workable. But you're also dealing with a guy who's probably making $25 million a year at this point. And, I'd assume that's what the contract is, somewhere in that range, 20 to 25 million, depending on what other offer sheets come in. And so he has to be a part of what you're doing at that point, or he has to get moved at the deadline if he's not. So I don't think it's, like you said, he definitely was persona non grata, but like, I don't think it's unfixable by any means. At least as soon, like, it felt like it for a little bit, but now that we've gotten some distance from it, it's like, all right, it wasn't the prettiest end of the season, but it does make sense when you take a step back and look at it from a 30,000 foot view. They try to integrate him as they were playing great basketball. It just didn't work.
Without having the necessary pieces to make non-shooters work. Jimmy's a non-shooter. Draymond's not really a shooter. Kuminga's not really a shooter. It's hard to play those type of lineups without shooting around him and they didn't have enough shooting around them. Steph could make him work to a degree, but that's just one player. Let's say he does come back. Do you start him?
I mean, at that contract number, you have to consider it, right? And that's where having a stretch big would be very important. And that also probably opens the window to the conversation of, does Draymond move into an Andre Iguodala role? And you start Steph, name your two guard, whether it's Moody or Pods or somebody that they trade for, Jimmy, Kuminga, and, a stretch big. I would worry about that lineup a little bit defensively. Draymond is so key and so vital to everything they do. But a lot of times at the start of the game, especially in regular season, you don't need to play with 100% defensive intensity right out of the gate. But I would worry about kind of the defensive identity they built maybe fading away a little bit if Draymond wasn't starting.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what stretch five they get. They get Brook Lopez. If it's him and Jimmy on the back line, that probably puts Kuminga in his best chance of success. You can kind of put him on ball. He doesn't have to be playing the low man. Yep. I think I would do it because one of my big goals for next season is just limiting the wear and tear on Draymond.
Yeah.
And one of the ways you do that is bring him off the bench. Bring him in with Quentin Post, who's going to be the 5-man to space the floor. And then all Draymond's doing is playing the 5 for 3 or 4 minutes at the end of the half, which is not that big a deal. I'm not going to say it's not a big deal. That feels way more sustainable than what the final 30 games of the season, right?
Yeah, of course.
Like, you're coming in at the 3-minute mark of the second quarter. All right, we're going to try to run these guys off the floor. You're not banging all game the way you would be if you're playing the center position. I do want to make the case. One advantage to keeping Kuminga here is if you get the right stretch big and the right shooting, he could be a workhorse for you offensively in the regular season.
Totally.
And that's probably, like, we're talking about how they need a 6-man to carry the offense. They could just lean into Kuminga being the guy who is your offensive punch, who allows Jimmy to, play kind of Iguodala-y basketball in the regular season.
Yeah. Because
you space it and you let, have at it, young guy. Just go get to the line 20 times. Totally. No, I that's the thing. Like the more because I've been, thinking about kind of, as Monty Poole has said some stuff about, stuff might not materialize for the Warriors. You're hearing some of the same stuff out of Slater. I've obviously put some thought into this, and I've definitely come around on the idea of him coming back and just kind of being that guy. Like you said, now you do have your offensive punch, so you can just go find other stuff with your free agency tools, and then maybe one trade. You don't have to focus on getting that score, because in theory, if you get close to whatever the best version of Kuminga can be at this stage in his career, that's a really good score for the most part. He's still going to do some stuff that bothers you. He's going to take some dumb shots, some ill-advised things. He's not going to be the cleanest with the ball. But he can score. And as long as it impacts winning at a high enough level, now you can, like you said, you go find a stretch big. Maybe you find another defensive minded guy. But it gives you a little bit more freedom to just hone in on one thing instead of having to view okay, we need this and that and this other thing. And it feels like you're not trying to cover up as many holes in the roster. Yeah, that's the other part I keep coming back to. It's they have more pieces on this roster than we probably give them credit for. They just don't fit together well. Yeah. So skeleton key is actually a great way to put it. They need to find a stretch big who can unlock some of these Kuminga Jimmy lineups. And I'm not convinced that isn't going to take you farther than whatever the underwhelming trade package you get for Kuminga is. It might lead you there, honestly. And it's a different type of roster than 2022, but we saw how essentially Otto and Bielitsa were that. They helped unlock a lot of things for that team. And it showed in their start to the season and obviously winning the championship. But, those guys weren't high minutes guys. They didn't score a ton of points. Otto averaged 6 points a game. It's not like he had some massive scoring output, but his smarts, his ability to shoot the ball, defensive versatility, all those things, it made everybody look better. I think a huge reason why Poole struggled so much, outside of, the off-court stuff with the punch the next season. I think it's a big one, to be fair. Yeah, of course it's a big one, but
he didn't have those smart forwards to play off of anymore. Like JTA was gone, Otto was gone, Bielitsa was gone. And if you like watch some of that film from early in the season, the 2-man game chemistry he had built with a lot of those guys was like really nice, and it helped those bench lineups pop. And that just, the next year that just didn't exist for him. It was like Jamichael Green and James Wiseman. They made his life so much harder just as a result of not having kind of those like versatile forward or big men type to like ease some of his playmaking burden and give him spacing.
Yeah. And then so we come back to, this entire conversation is just putting more credence into how important getting a stretch big is for this team. Like, it's the hardest thing to find right now. You're watching the Pacers. The Pacers have Obi Toppin and Miles Turner with Siakam there. It's a big part of their success. Very big part of their success. The Thunder, they have Chet Holmgren they can go to. They could take Isaiah Hartenstein off the floor and go small like that. Like, the Warriors need that. And then actually the more I think about it, I'm not actually going to be bothered if they don't move off Kuminga. I'm actually look at it as an investment in him. If they can find a legitimate stretch five, not Jamichael Green, not praying Quentin Post gets 20 times better next year. Because to me, Quentin Post should be playing 10 to 20 minutes off the bench. Like 12 to 15 minutes a game. He can certainly shoot it. I'm just not counting on anything else coming around for him. What you need is that guy who's giving you the first 20 plus minutes of the game. And then the final 10 or so minutes at center could be Draymond at the 5, right? Or you throw Trace out there as you need him or stuff like that, right? Yep. But to me, it's like if you find that stretch big with Quentin Post behind him, then I think you can just run your offense the way you want to, and you're going to naturally generate looks through spacing.
Yeah, totally. No, 100%. I think it's not my favorite option to run it back with Kuminga. I'd rather they get more like creative and like find something great in the sign and trade market, but I don't think it's the worst outcome either. That's how I'll put it. Like I'm okay with it. Like I said, you don't have to worry about that scoring part anymore, like addressing that on your roster, as long as he's like, playing a team game and like, everybody's bought into like making it work. Just go find those couple little skeleton key pieces that make everything else click, and I'm like,
they're hard to find.
Yeah, they are very hard to find, but I'm kind of convincing myself of it right now. Like, no, this actually can work, and it might actually be not the best outcome, but also, a B+ outcome. You know what I mean? Like, and that might be enough. That might be enough to like vault this team into contender status. Like true bona fide, one of the best teams in the league, winning 55 to 60 games in the regular season next year.
I mean, you get the right stretch 5, you get Brook Lopez out there, and I know he's old, but you get a Steph, Pods, Jimmy, Kuminga, Brook Lopez lineup out there. I think it holds up defensively enough. You obviously got Draymond out there when it's like
winning
cutting time, no matter what, but I think it holds up in the start of the games. And I think you have more than enough spacing there to like Kuminga would turn into Sean Marion on offense in that lineup.
Yeah.
He'd walk into 15 to 20 points on reasonable efficiency just because he's getting one-on-one opportunities at the rim because the center has been pulled away from the rim.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that matters. And that matters because that means Steph doesn't have to kill himself to score in early December. And Jimmy doesn't have to go playoff Jimmy at Christmas on. And Draymond doesn't have to play the 5 for 50 games of the year. Like you said this on an earlier pod, and I think it's one of the most important points. They can't trade all the kids because the season is so long. You just need some of that energy that young guys provide you. You need that Pods game in January. You need that Moses Moody game where he gets a key rebound and sticks 4 threes. You need that stretch where Kuminga scores 20 plus points, 10 straight games, and it just feels like Steph can kind of play a decoy. Yeah, you can play a decoy and then like, okay, I'm gonna hit a couple shots here when we need them, but like I'll be sending back screens for 3/4 of the game type of thing. Like I'm not saying, I think all that stuff really only is possible if you get shooting with size around what they have right now.
Yeah, and I just think the perimeter speed thing is just so important in today's league, and like you need young legs for that, and like you can't deny that. Like the Pacers and the Thunder are not old teams by any means. OKC would be one of the youngest teams ever to win a championship. They might be the youngest. But like you need the young legs during the regular season. It's so important. And I do think like the Warriors are getting a good script of maybe potentially had to use Kuminga just like by watching the Pacers, like they need to get him out in transition as much as possible. Like the way that, Toppin plays, and he's not Siakam level, but like just the way that those guys are utilized within that system, like the Warriors could do something similar if you get that stretch big man, right? Like if you get your Brook Lopez, who is essentially Miles Turner for the Pacers.
Yeah.
Like, and Brook is old as he's old as dirt, but like he hasn't been able to move for years anyway. As long as his body holds up, I think he's going to be fine. Like he's going to be a valuable player in the role.
I did the pod with Andy a couple days ago, and I was shocked at how many games he still plays every year. It's like 78, 79 at 30 plus minutes.
Yeah, it's crazy. And they wouldn't need him for that. They wouldn't need him for 30 plus minutes. They need him for 20, 25, maybe the occasional night, a specific matchup.
No, but like when you look at like the Basketball Reference page, they'll say 24.7 minutes per game on the season type of thing.
Wait, and that's the best case scenario for everybody, like the best case scenario for Draymond, it's best case for Brook. It's going to keep both those guys fresher for the stretch run. And then you have real lineup and matchup versatility entering every playoff series. You have an answer for any type of matchup that can be thrown at you. Which
we haven't discussed, but like that is kind of OKC's secret sauce here too.
Yeah.
Caruso, I mean, he's getting the praise he's deserved for years, but like the going from guarding Jokic to Ant to Tyrese Halliburton, like could not have three more different matchups, right? Mm-hmm. And that's versatility right there. And so for the Warriors going into next season, they're banking on their vets' IQ, but you can only bet on the vet IQ if you put the appropriate amount of versatility around him. This roster didn't have enough versatility. Steve had to play a shorter bench when we got into the playoffs. And eventually what I always deemed as the worst case scenario happened, which was, Steph got worn down. He pulled a hammy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
He broke his ass.
Yeah. I mean, there was some unfortunate luck with their playoff run. There truly was. And the way that Steve has talked after the season multiple times, like they really thought they could go win the title. And you would expect OKC, especially if they win it, they're better next year. Teams will get better in the West. Like the Spurs are coming, the Rockets will probably improve upon what they did in like, maybe not in terms of regular season wins, but you would think they're a more formidable opponent in terms of a playoff series next year. Not that they weren't formidable already, but like you expect them to take a little bit of a leap, and they also might go trade for Kevin Durant. Like that stuff will happen around them in the West. So you can't stay entirely stagnant. You can run it back to a certain degree, but you need to add reinforcements around the kind of the perimeter of the roster who can be true playoff contributors.
And they got to wear Skims. Because I don't know how someone is expected to guard Nikola Jokic in one series and then guard Anthony Edwards in the next series without underwear that is both comfortable but provides the correct amount of structure and fit. You're moving around. You're gonna have to guard in the post. You're gonna be guarding the perimeter. You need some underwear that can move with you. And honestly, like, I say this kind of facetiously, but I mean it. Like the best pair of boxer briefs I've ever purchased. I feel 100%. Like I can do anything in my Skims. I feel like when I play, a little Saturday morning run, I make sure that my favorite pair of Skims are available to me because I shoot the ball just a little bit better. I feel a little bit better out there. Feel is everything. Once you start hitting my age, everything hurts. So you need every little advantage possible. And the number one advantage you got to start with is your underwear, right? That's the number one right there. So guys, shop Skims Men's at skims.com and Skims stores. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey, select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Skims.
Light Years Podcast, we are brought to you by Lucy. Lucy are 100% nicotine, always tobacco-free pouches and breakers. Lucy breakers are nicotine pouches with an extra surprise. Each pouch holds a capsule that can be broken open to release extra flavor and hydration. Set yourself up with a subscription and have Lucy delivered straight to your door. My personal favorite are the 12 milligram wintergreens. They're great. They give me a little bit of an extra boost in the morning with my morning coffee, get my mind right, get ready for the workday. So let's all level up your nicotine routine with Lucy. Go to lucy.co/lightyears and use promo code lightyears to get 20% off your first order. Lucy has a 30-day refund policy if you change your mind. Again, that's lucy.co and use code lightyears to get 20% off. Lucy products are only for adults of legal age, and every order is age verified. This product contains nicotine, and nicotine is an addictive chemical.
All right, let's end it on this. What percentage chance do you give of Kuminga returning? As of today, June 9th. Got about 3 to 4 weeks.
I'd say it's 60-40 he's back.
Ooh.
Just reading the tea leaves.
I'm going to go 50-50. I'm legitimately, and I don't actually, ultimately, if he's back and the Warriors didn't want him back, it is the Warriors' fault because they missed exit ramps the past 3 years. But just looking at the way free agency is going, I'm not convinced he has an offer on the market. I'm not convinced it's coming. I'm not convinced there's this team who's dying to give him $200 million. You know, you're seeing the way everyone's operating on the market. Why is there just some assumption someone's going to pay him $150 million to find out? Because that's really what it is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who like his talent, but he hasn't actually proven he can be a top guy.
Right.
And, if you like his talent, you'll say, well, it's the Warriors' fault. They haven't given him the opportunity. And there's certainly validity to that. But you still are going to have to pay like $150 million to find out. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how many teams are in the find out business at that price tag anymore.
Yeah, just with the new cap structure and the aprons.
Exactly.
And there's also just not a lot of teams with cap space. Like, there's not a lot of teams who can throw $150 million without him at him without like renouncing certain guys and making like real roster decisions. So yeah, there isn't like a massive free agent market just in terms of the teams that have a bunch of cap space to make a bet like that.
Like that's why there are a lot more teams interested in trading for him when he was on the rookie deal, because it was like, I like him. I think they're misusing him. Let's see what it is. And we have a year to evaluate how much we like him before extension comes in. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the more I think about it, the more I'm like, this probably is going to end up being back. He's probably going to end up back on a number that's lower than what he wants to.
Yep.
And we'll see. But I do truly believe the idea that this is kind of out of the Warriors' hands now. Like his agent's doing work. They're really preying on on a Pelicans or a Dallas Mavericks, and those two are just top of mind. But like they're like, we really like him, and then you're like, okay, let's make a deal. And they're like, all right, you can have our player who's 20 times better than him. And they're like, why, thank you. Like, I don't know. It just, when you start like logically breaking it down, you're like, man, that's a lot of things that you have to start with the assumption that the other person is dumb, like, oh, the Pelicans might like Kuminga. Okay. Well, they're not going to just give you Trey Murphy.
Right.
So how exciting is Kelly Olynyk to you?
Right. Yeah. No,
like you just end up in these like things where you're just like, man, that's just a lot of steps that the Warriors don't control having to happen. And that doesn't usually happen,
Yeah. And at that point, like, if it's Kelly Olynyk or Kuminga, like, I just keep Kuminga, honestly, like, because the stretch big like loses some value in a way without Kuminga. Like part of the reason for getting a stretch big is to free up downhill opportunities for guys who can get downhill. Without Kuminga, how many guys on this roster can do that?
I also can't in good faith co-sign giving him up for a 34 or 35-year-old you're planning to play 18 to 20 minutes a game.
100%.
Like Olynyk is actually an example of one of those stretch fives that might be nice to unlock to be a skeleton key, right?
Yes.
But like you're trading for him to unlock the opportunity, not to trade the opportunity,
Right.
So
exactly. And I mean, at that point, you can probably just like, if you really want Olynyk, you can move Moses Moody for him or Buddy Hield, whatever, like you can find other ways to get Kelly Olynyk. I'd rather not use Kuminga to do that because, shoot, I mean, on his new contract, Kuminga's probably not going to have great trade value. But as long as he's not like a total bum, there will still be, I think he still is young enough to where there is interest in like what he is as a basketball player. So, if it's a reasonable number that he comes back on, it's still, you still have the opportunity to move him at the deadline for something like real, but if the thing is, it's the classic conundrum of, well, he's playing too well, we can't trade him, versus like, he's not playing at all, the value's too low. Like that, we've been stuck in the cycle for years and years now.
What if he's starting to figure it out? Why would we want to trade him now? But no, I mean, like, regardless of that, because God knows I can talk myself in every different direction on this. I don't know who wants him. It's very silent. I'll put it that way. And sometimes when it's silent, that means something's actually happening. Like anytime you see like stuff being leaked, you can assume that it's probably not happening. But yeah. I don't know. It does kind of, to your point, it does feel like we're moving towards a world where that offer sheet doesn't come, that sign and trade does not materialize the way you want it to, and the Warriors end up keeping him on a lower number than he wants, and they're going to hopefully get a stretch big and see what they have, and we'll do this at the deadline again.
And as long as it's not too much of a distraction and like he's contributing in a winning way, like. It's not like I've gotten kind of put out there as like this massive Kuminga hater. I just don't think he fits great.
You fucking hate him.
Yeah, I think he's the worst. I'm the worst.
Blame me.
But yeah, I just, there is talent there. Like there's genuine basketball talent. It's about figuring it out in this system, which is not the easiest thing to do for a young player, especially with his kind of like individual motivations and the want to be the guy. But it's not like he's useless. Like we saw that even in the playoffs after Steph went out. The guy can score the basketball at the very minimum. So it's about getting him to buy into those other things, and maybe a new contract. This kind of goes counterintuitive, but maybe the new contract helps him do that. Because
maybe the security, maybe the security of the contract and the promise of a specific role gets him to do what you want. Because you are hitting it on the head there. I don't think it's a talent issue. I think if you get the right shooting around him, it's not a system issue either. Like they do need someone who can space the floor, because it's just too much of a clogged toilet without that. Yeah. And that's not something that Kuminga can fix, But beyond that, to your point, it's mentality. It's like, are you going to commit to doing some of these things? Because even if he commits to doing it, it's not that I think he'll be perfect at them. I think he'll do them well enough to keep himself on the floor the amount of minutes he wants.
I mean, look, and people have made this joke as the finals have gone on and as the playoffs have gone on. But like, I think Andy specifically is calling, Benedict Mathurin like Kuminga East. And, like the Warriors and Pacers parallels keep running. But like Mathurin scored like 16 points a game this year on good efficiency. Like, and the way that the Pacers play helps spur that on, like the speed and all the cutting and the movement, like that helps kind of unlock him.
5 out. It's always 5 out.
But yes, but you need the shooting as well. So yeah, like there is a world where and Mathurin's been in and out of the rotation during the playoffs, but he's also been kind of essential so far in these finals because of his athletic traits, even though he fell out of the rotation against the Knicks in a slower kind of like more ground bound matchup. But specific matchups, he still has a ton of value.
Shepard matchup.
Right. Exactly. It's a Moody matchup versus a Kuminga. You know what I mean? Like they'll still have to play that game a little bit, but Steve's smart enough to figure that out.
Yeah. All right. Appreciate everyone. We'll be back.
Thanks, everybody.